Well, the host committee, those who inspired and made possible the Super Bowl, called it the Bold North. And after the weather of this last weekend, it's hard to remember back to that Sunday and the climate back then, but the success of the enterprise is just phenomenal. The amount of time and effort, work, planning, contingency, everything that Andrea and Maureen put into it, and their fabulous staff and the host committee, just phenomenal. And now they have the results to show for it. So with that, Maureen, let me ask you to take over.
All right. So hello, and thank you, Governor. None of this would be possible without you, truly. It wouldn't have happened. He said yes when the NFL called, and then we were in business.
It's a paid political announcement.
So anyway, again, this is a team effort. Our goal was very simple. We wanted to use the platform, the wonderful platform that the NFL gave us, to showcase Minnesota, to tell the story of the bold North and the wonderful people that live here, to create an event where everyone was welcome, whether you had $1 or $10,000 to spend, we wanted, or none at all. We wanted to create events that were for you. Many of them, like our 48 free concerts, were totally free. Of course, you had to stand in the cold, and it snowed, but that's okay. We wanted to bring visitors to Minnesota during a traditionally low season, and hotels saw 3 times their traditional revenue during that period, with a 98% occupancy game weekend. We wanted to leave a lasting legacy, and we did so with over $5.5 million given to people in need, children in need throughout the state. Most importantly, we wanted to bring people back again and again. Already, Meet Minneapolis tells us that inquiries are up 30% for hotels, meetings, conventions. And our research that Ken will go into said 83% of people that were visiting Minnesota for the first time intend to come back. 83%. That's huge. I hope you've all had calls from your relatives wanting to stay with you, because I've heard that's happening. And we couldn't have done it without the hospitality of Minnesotans. Our 10,000 volunteers, our wonderful hoteliers, event managers, venue managers, the police, the security from all parts of the state, the National Guard, every single person that helped, including our staff, Wendy, Dave, Alex, Andrea. I can't see because of the lights, but several of us are here. That's what made the Super Bowl great. That's what helped people create memories. It's how we host events in Minnesota, and that's the Bold North way. So with that, I want to introduce you to Ken McGill. Ken is the person that 4.5 years ago we made a call to, because he has expertise in looking at the economic impact of these type of sporting events. And Ken McGill is with Rockport Analytics. He did the pre-study and he did the post-study. So with that, I'll introduce you to Ken.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, Governor Dayton. Good morning, everyone. Aside from the goals that Maureen just mentioned, our task was very specific, and that was to put numbers to the potential contribution of the Super Bowl to the Twin Cities, to Minnesota. And when you talk about a potential contribution or economic impact, the first focus is to gather all of the spending that takes place, be it from visitors, be it from residents, be it from hosting organizations, broadcast organizations. And we did that. The second thing you do is eliminate resident spending, because the notion is we're looking for incremental things, things that are net new to the local and state economy. The next thing we do is subtract out tourism that would have been here already. Again, the word is incremental. How much tourism would take place in that 10-day period in late January or early February? We measure it, we subtract it. The next task is to subtract the things that don't stay here. There's lots of spending that comes in with visitors and hosting organizations, but it doesn't all stay. So we go through that process. And then finally, an economic impact study has you focus on how that spending resounds through the local and state economy and becomes income to citizens, businesses, and governments. So, total spending, the big top line number is $450 million. This is a gross figure. It includes $271 million from visitors, 125,000 of them, and it includes $179 million from game, event, broadcast hosting organizations. That 179 is truly local because we work with those organizations to eliminate spending with vendors who were outside of the Twin Cities and Minnesota. The average visitor spent $608 per person per day. They stayed 3.9 days, and that generated, as Maureen intimated, 266,000 hotel room nights. How do we know all of this? Well, it comes from a data-driven process that we go through. First of all, we intercepted with the staff of folks that we sent out with iPads, and we literally intercepted visitors and asked them questions about where they were from, how much they spent on an array of categories, and whether or not they would come back again. 83% of first-time visitors said they would, by the way. We used data from private organizations like Smith Travel Research and AirDNA so that we understood what happened with our hotels and our peer-to-peer accommodation partners. We did a survey of corporate event sponsors, asking them how many people came to their event, how much did they spend on catering, staff costs, rental, and the like. And then finally, we went through a painstaking process to reach out to organizations like the NFL, the NBC, ESPN, Metro Airports Commission. It's a long list. And we didn't ask them what their budget was. We waited so that we could ask them what was actually spent in the Twin Cities and Minnesota. So it's all about net new spending. And at the end of the day, that $450 million that I mentioned a moment ago turned into $370 million net new incremental spending in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. We subtracted this notion of the tourism that would have been here anyway. Our estimate was about $80.5 million. We assumed that about 82% of that was displaced. Not all tourism was displaced, because not all hotel rooms, for example, were filled by Super Bowl visitors. At the end of the day, that $370 million resounded through the local economy and became $400 million. $400 million is the net economic impact of Super Bowl 52. Super Bowl 52 made a tremendous fiscal contribution to the state and municipal governments as well. Just focusing on what the visitors spent, the combination of state and local tax collections was about $32 million. $13 million of that was the Minnesota sales tax, for example. $785,000 came from hotel taxes. Restaurant and liquor taxes generated $920,000 in incremental tax receipts. Rental car excise, $1.6 million, and on and on. This also includes income taxes generated by the $273 million in wages that went to the workers that helped with the events and the game. At the end of the day, that $450 million, if you distill it down into $1 of spending, 88 cents was retained by the Twin Cities in Minnesota. This is an extraordinary number, and it's a testimony to a diverse and dynamic economy. You were able to keep more than many other examples that we've worked on over the years. So with that, I will close and open it up to questions.
Good. I'd just like to acknowledge Lester Bagley with the Vikings. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all that you contributed, your organization, to the success of this event. There was only one slight glitch in the whole scheme, but you're going to correct that. I've already got my tickets reserved to go to Atlanta next year. I won't be governor, so I'll have to buy a ticket up in the bleachers, but we're going to get there. Questions on this subject?
How much did the study cost and who paid for it? The host committee paid for it. And it was, I actually can't remember, but I can look it up and give it to you. But we paid part of it in the very beginning, and then this was the back half of it. But it's part of our host committee obligation.
Marie, whenever a study like this comes out, people ask, well, how much money did it cost to put this event on? Can you talk about what some of the costs were associated with hosting the Super Bowl and where that money came from?
Certainly, you've seen that we've paid about $7.1 million for city services, police, National Guard, and so on. There's lots of other expenses, including venue rental, and I'm not remembering the numbers off the top of my head, but overall, between the Super Bowl is in the 50 millions, in the low 50s, and then if you add our legacy fund contributions onto that, what we raised and what we left behind, you're closer to the high 50s or 60.
But 50 million was that about the amount that the host committee raised?
Yeah, just over 50 million.
How do these numbers compare to other recent Super Bowl hosts' economic impacts?
We are ahead of the last two cities. We're ahead of San Francisco and we're ahead of Houston. In Arizona, they combined theirs with the Waste Management Golf Tournament that was at exactly the same time. So it's hard to break out what was Super Bowl and what was the huge, I can't remember the name of that golf tournament, but it's a big one. Who was before that? So I think we're definitely at the top. When you get your study, you'll see where we come out. And I think we're in the top 2 or 3 from that chart, if I remember that. Yeah, it's in your packet.
Well,
Yes, good idea.
maybe I can add some context. The Super Bowl 51 in Houston, visitors spent a little bit more than they did here, but the operations and broadcast organizations spent much more here than they did in Houston. There's a whole host of reasons for that, but suffice it to say that that $400 million number that I mentioned a moment ago, the net economic impact, in Houston it was $347 million. So in part it's because more was spent, and in part it's because you were able to retain more in this economy than Houston did.
Sir, could you talk, you quoted 88 cents on the dollar, and I'm sorry, I missed part of it. Would you elaborate on that just a little bit more?
Well, it's a simple transformation. $450 million was gross spending from all sources. You were able to retain, essentially, in the economy, $400 million of that. So if you distill it down into $1 worth of spending, it's about 88 cents.
And why do you think our retention efforts were better than other cities?
Well, a big part of economic impact is trying to account for something called leakages. And that, for example, would be a situation where, let me think of a simple example. A hotel must purchase things to serve its visitors, cleaning supplies, as an example. We go through the process using a publicly available economic model of the local economy to figure out whether or not you have enough cleaning supply vendors in the economy. If you do not, then the remainder has to be imported. When you import something, that income, that spending leaves the economy. So as we go through that process, what we've learned is that because of the diversity of the Twin City and Minnesota economies, you were able to retain more of that supply chain spending, if you will.
Is the $370 million, does that include what was spent, the 50 or so million that was talked about?
Only the portion that was spent locally. yeah.
We spent locally.
Those costs involved for the broadcast and so forth, does that make it unattractive to the NFL to want to host it again here?
I'm not sure I have an answer on that. They did it, and I'm sure that they looked at it closely, and their decision was to make the expenditures.
Is there a reason that they were higher here than other places, though?
Well, I think there were additional costs that they might have in the Bold North that they might not have in a host city like Houston, let's say. Snow removal, for example. And it's things like that, I think, that were a big part of it.
Or even, if I may ask, how do the results of this study either help or hurt the region from trying to attract another marquee event in the future?
Well, I think the fact that we had such wonderful people, I mean, that has been noted by all events looking for a location. The fact that we hosted well, and even we did it at the hardest time of the year. The game was played, the coldest game on record, right, Lester? Or the coldest Super Bowl on record. We had, crime went down. People had wonderful results, had great experiences. So from that aspect, I think we're ready to host another one. Whether or not they choose to do it in February or another time of year, that's up to them. But it does show the world that Minnesota can host events and do it well, even at the worst time.
And we already have another marquee event next year with the NCAA Final Four. And, the PGA just broke a historic precedent by committing the Ryder Cup to Hazeltine for the first time a venue's been chosen for again. So, I mean, anytime we're put up to the test, we shine. And that is noticed by people who have a lot at stake in these events, that they're carried out remarkably well. And I don't remember seeing anybody in Houston doing a snowmobile upside down.
Ken, a quick question for you. How do you respond, step up to the microphone, please, to the critics who always come out when they see figures like this and claim the numbers are padded and they're inflated just to make it look like these are worthwhile endeavors? How do you respond to that and defend your analytics?
Well, I think as an analyst, I'm very interested in the critics' specific issues with these studies. And as we go down through them, there are basically 5. And we have addressed 4 of them. The 5th one, I'm not sure anyone can address. They are as follows. In some cases, these studies include resident spending. In the world of economic impact, that is a violation of the way it's supposed to work. In some cases, they don't account for all of these non-local vendor import issues that I mentioned a moment ago. We address that. In many cases, these studies do not subtract displaced tourism. We go through the painstaking process of subtracting that. So what we're trying to do is address these kinds of common complaints and one by one go through and make sure that our analysis incorporates these things and addresses them.
So what he's
trying to say, in market contrast to what you've experienced for the last 3 months, these are honest, accurate numbers.
Thank you for that.
Ken,
last on this topic.
just Ken, real quick, what was the one item you couldn't account for? Is that the local?
No. The one item that's very difficult to account for is that there can be companies that are involved in hosting or serving visitors that are not headquartered here. And they may have installations here. And as a result, it looks, when we account for it, it's local spending. But some of that spending can, through profits, leave the local economy. I'm not sure of a way to do that. It's easy to say that it's a problem, but if you look at what margins are for most industries, it's not that much that could be, let's say, undercounted.
Is there any way to count weather-related spending? Maureen mentioned, we set a record for cold weather. Is there any slice of this that's, parkas purchased or anything like that?
Well, we've got quite a bit of detail. I suppose we could answer that question. I don't have one for you at this moment, but there are many categories that we could go through and account for and perhaps guesstimate that they aren't a part of warmer weather Super Bowls.
What about impact in greater Minnesota outside the Twin Cities, other than what the committee did, giving the grants out to the various programs they supported? You know that?
Well, we took, our number looks at the, technically the MSP metropolitan statistical area, which includes, I think, 10 or 11 counties. And then we also looked at the state as in total. So those numbers are inclusive of the state and. Yeah.
When you talk
We'll move on to other subjects, so thank you very, very much. Jenny?
Come on.
So now that the innocent bystanders are cleared away, other subjects?
Governor, what do you think about the new NFL policy on kneeling for the national anthem?
I'm not going to, there are enough comments about it. I think I supported the constitutional amendment to ban the burning of the American flag when I was in the U.S. Senate, because I said something ought to be sacrosanct, something ought to be above all of the disagreements we have about policy and practices and the like. And I haven't thought about whether the national anthem should be in that category, but it's certainly close.
Governor, what are you going to do with the bonding bill and when?
In due time, all things shall be revealed unto thee. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. That's the King James version. Yes, there'll be more to report tomorrow, and then actually on Thursday. And it's a slow week. There's no politics going on anywhere, and guys are all get a rest up for the weekend. Looking forward to it, I'm sure. Tomorrow we'll have more.
We'll have more, just want to clear, you will have something new on the bonding bill tomorrow?
Something new on the bonding bill tomorrow and other bills as well.
Any other questions through that bonding bill, project by project, and what sense have you gotten as you've gone through it?
Tomorrow.
Everyone good? Governor, there
I
are...
spent 2 hours working on the letter this morning, and last night this morning. I'm not going to blow my own cover.
So you spent 2 hours working on a bonding bill letter?
Just the letter.
Governor, with the political conventions coming up, I assume we know who you support for the United States Senate. Are you going to make an endorsement in the gubernatorial race?
Not until after the convention, no.
Everyone good?
No, I'm a little bit confused. 2 hours working on a letter for the bonding bill, if you're just going to sign it en blanc, then you don't do that, correct?
I'll let it speak for itself tomorrow. I have opinions on even parts that I'm, prepared to go along with. Save it for tomorrow. I'll have plenty to say about the bonding bill tomorrow.
Is it just the pension bill pending?
I'm sorry?
Which other bills are still pending besides that?
Well, the pension bill, the wild rice sulfate bill, the metro governance.
There are a few bills that need to be after that.
And there are other ones, quite a number of them that are not particularly controversial that I intend to sign. I'll do that. Today we'll put out a report later today of the ones I've signed today, but I don't think there's anything that's going to be.
Governor, the release of these numbers, back to actually the original Super Bowl, I suspect some will say, well, if we had Polymet and Twin Metals, that would be $500 million per year into the economy, northern Minnesota specifically. How do you respond to that?
Not either or. Every bit adds on to the overall benefit of the state. Thanks.
Thank you.